Welcome to the Light Reading Podcast. You're listening to the flagship audio production of Light Reading, the telecom industry's most important outlet for daily news and analysis. This is Phil Harvey. I'm an editor at Light Reading, slaving over a hot keyboard and making sure your news arrives fresh, fair, and in a reasonably tasty presentation. Joining me on the podcast today is my Light Reading colleague, Kelsey Zeiser. She is the head chef over at the 5G Exchange, and she works with a broad selection of industry ingredients and puts on a 5G feast for you every single day, so go check out her fine work there. Our interview subject today is the CEO of Orange Business Services, Mr. Helmut Reisinger. And Orange Business Services has made a lot of noise about its credentials as an integrator of all kinds of connectivity-based services for enterprises of all sizes all around the world. And in particular, it's made a big effort in the multi-cloud environment. So Mr. Reisinger will weigh in on what his company is doing, what it hopes to do next, where it sees growth. He'll help us define some terms that will help us understand his company a little bit better and also set it apart in the market. And we will also talk about coronavirus preparedness because, hey, that's just where things are right now, aren't they? You will get all of that and much, much more right after this break. Okay, Helmut Reisinger, CEO of Orange Business Services, thanks so much for being on the Light Reading Podcast.
Hello, Phil. Nice to be with you all.
Great to have you. And I guess the first question is in a lot of Orange Business Services materials, marketing materials, and conversations, the words network native have come up over and over again. And I wanted to get a definition. I think I know what cloud native is, but I'm not 100% sure what network native is. It seems to be a point of differentiation for Orange Business Services. So what does network native mean?
Network native stands for the fact that we have our DNA is coming from the networks. And as you know, Orange Business Services is providing B2B digital services to more than 3,500 multinationals in more than 200 countries across the world. And we are doing today quite a substantial part already of IT and integration services. To be precise, we published our numbers recently, 37, so above 1/3 of our activities are already digital or IT and integration services. This is why we wanted to answer ourselves the question, who are we actually in the end for our customers? And we said we are a network native digital services company. And this is composed of one core business that you would call it. That's the global telco core, providing networks into far places like Burundi or wherever our global customers are. But that's also on four growth vectors. This is cyber defense, this is cloud, this is digital and data, and it's smart mobility services, the latter in anticipation of the emergence of 5G. And all of this, I believe, points to the fact that data in itself, and we just entered a new decade, is actually becoming more and more a key production or value creator for enterprises. And we call this the Internet of Enterprises. That is actually not only combining people or connecting people, it's also connecting sites, and more it's connecting objects. You know, in the Internet of Consumers, more and more connecting people. But here, the Internet of Enterprises, it's people, sites, objects. It's not only about sharing emotions, it's really also about sharing know-how. And of course, you need to protect your intellectual property. That's why everything needs to be also cyber secured end to end. And we believe for our enterprise customers, the fact that for them, hyper connectivity is becoming more important, more and more is cloud enabled. And of course, they need to protect this intellectual property. That's why we said it has a distinctive value to be network native. You have sharper eyes, if I may say it like this, if you have a DNA of a global telco operator. And this is particularly important when we think about cyber defense threat. You see more of the potential threats that are coming across our global networks. Or secondly, when we talk about accessing cloud services for your knowledge workers wherever they are based, because networks are more and more platforms as well to access those cloud services. So this is why we termed ourselves network native service digital services company. And we also defined what we do. We connect, protect, and innovate for sustainable business growth of our clients.
Helmut, as Orange is reinventing itself from what we would define as a traditional telco, is Orange Business Services in a position to offer its most popular products on any telcos or CSP's infrastructure?
Yeah. Well, what we see starting from our customers is that historically the customers they still have, but they had primarily a physical value chain. Something was designed, something has been produced somewhere, and something then has been supply chained, and then it has got sold and after-sales serviced. All of these value chains have been globalized. The second wave that happened over the past 20 years was most of these value chains have been digitized. That's what we call the digital value chain. And this is the link to your question, in the sense that a digital value chains mean the chain of value creation from data at its generation, where to collect the data, then to transport it onto networks that are also more and more virtualized, then to be stored and compute this data, that's the cloud story. Then, of course, you have to do some analytics on it, and hopefully, because we speak about digital with a human touch, you also have to collaborate and share something. And of course, it needs to be end-to-end cyber secured. So these parts of the value chain, can they put on any kind of networks? Not really, yet we have to cooperate to provide an end-to-end, and this is our promise to our customers, an end-to-end offering to our clients, wherever they operate, in whichever part in the United States, to Australia, etc. Then, of course, we do not own the last mile everywhere. This is why we need to cooperate in this ecosystem play, because this Internet of Enterprise is an ecosystem play. And there is one trend that we see more and more emerging, and we have signed up major clients on this already, which is multi-sourcing integration. Our customers want to say, I want to have one trusted partner to take care of my communications platform, of my network infrastructure, for example. And it's this partner then who needs to take care that, for example, in China, we are complying also with the requirements of local regulation, or in Russia, or in the United States. Because in the overall framework, what we see is that despite the internet is one global phenomenon, we do see that there is more and more geopolitically driven data ecosystems. Now you have the Chinese ecosystem, you have the Russian ecosystem, you have the European very data sensibility, data protection, or GDPR ecosystem. You have the US. In the US, you have California that is more closer to Europe than to the rest of US, if I take it from that point of view. You have Argentina, Brazil, more moving also into the European side. So in that sense, can we offer those products? Yes, they are running on lots of different platforms. And this is why we focus even on cloud. We say our approach is multi-cloud and services, because our customers that are global ask for options. They want to have not something that where they are locked in. Please give me 2 or 3 options. Similar thing we did recently on the software-defined networks. We are working with 2 major players technologically that we integrate because we want to give options, and they are very 2 different options.
You know, that's a good, a great explanation of how you can be network native, but also not own the entirety of the infrastructure in order to provide services. So multi-service, multi-connection, and multi-cloud kind of plays into that. One quick question about the network capabilities, and then we'll go to break. What capabilities is Orange Business Services building out right now? What are you looking to add over the next couple of years, and how are you and how is that all coming about in terms of the overall Orange Business Services portfolio?
Well, first of all, our approach, as I said, our network capabilities for our global clients are really reaching more than 200 countries. And here, the big theme has been, if I look back to the past 10 years, I'm now more than 10 years now in the Orange family. We started off coming from classical, very private networks at global scale. We then moved into, this was around 2012-13, we moved into hybrid networks. Hybrid standing for the fact people said, oops, I want to use for the less critical sites or for sites where there's less critical data, I want to use internet. But then, of course, we had to put on top of it so-called application performance management vehicles. So these were solutions in order to make sure that the experience from the knowledge worker of that company or that customer is the same whether he was using a private network or the internet. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you talk internet, you need to make sure that there is security around it. Now, this has been done, if I may say it like this, in a more, the French would say a bricolage, a bit of handicrafted way. We were building it from scratch and manually. With the emergence of the software-defined networking revolution, SDN, this and virtualization, this allowed for a new way of more agility and flexibility to manage and integrate certain parts of network components, private networks, you can use internet bricks into it, etc., into your overall solution. And you can actually, because it's virtualized, put this on universal platforms if you want. And here, what we have been working on, and I hope that some of the reviews you have seen, we have become a leader on that for the first time at global level in terms of executing on it for our clients. The next thing will be, there will be more and more intelligence moving to the edge. And therefore, we need to have enough compute power as well on the edge of a given site. And what we will never compromise on is the fact that as we talk about the Internet of Enterprise, the intellectual property of any given business and the data needs to be protected end to end, from collecting the data until you share it or you work on it and you transport and you store and compute, etc. So the edge topic is a critical one, the virtualization and the rollout. And recently we have announced this, we have signed up great customers at global level like Sony or even the Mars Group of the United States, if I take two Americans. And we are proud of that to, again, accompany this major transformation of network platforms towards the software-defined age using a uniform global service approach. There is one team across the globe 24/7 doing the build and run. And this is really a great expertise that is available for our customers.
Excellent. And we will pause there for a quick break. This podcast, by the way, is bricolage, as you say. I think it's made with readily available components and guest host. Sorry, Kelsey. All right, here we go. We will pause for a second. We'll go on a quick break, and we'll be right back on the Light Reading Podcast. Welcome back to the Light Reading Podcast. I'm Phil Harvey. I'm with co-host and Light Reading editor Kelsey Zeiser. Hello, Kelsey.
Heyo.
And we are joined today by Orange Business Services CEO Helmut Reisinger from Paris. Hello, Helmut.
Hello, Phil.
Thanks for being with us. The first question I should ask that's kind of more newsworthy, we've talked a little bit about Orange Business Services and how it sees itself in the world in terms of how it differentiates itself from competitors, the services that it offers, and where its network is going. Now there's some other things that we can't control, and that's one of those. If you've walked through an airport lately, is the spread of the latest coronavirus. And as we're recording this in February, late February, the outbreak has spread to parts of northern Italy, and some entire towns there have been quarantined. And so there's a bit more concern about it this week than there was, in previous weeks, because before it was sort of kept to mainland China for the most part, with smaller outbreaks in other places. So I wanted to ask you, as a CEO, you've obviously got to be watching this and maybe anticipating or maybe thinking through how this could affect your business, since Orange Business Services is a global business, has customers all over the place, and this affects their ability to move around. It's still early days in this, but have you any thoughts on how you prepare for something like this, or how you respond as a business?
Yeah, well, first of all, on this coronavirus, of course, I think it's a perfect example of think the unthinkable. I mean, who would have thought that you were just mentioning those Italian towns that suddenly a sized town in northern Italy is completely quarantined, blocked off. And of course, to a bigger scale, this happened in the region of Hubei and the city of Wuhan, and it impacted us, of course. Now, how to prepare? Now, as we are operating with more than 27,000 staff in more than 100 countries, they are spread all across all continents. We have so-called anticipation crisis teams. And when we saw the first waves of news coming, and this was actually, I think, around about the 10th or 11th of January, we did one thing in that already, which was flight cancellations on our side for the employees, as well as then we canceled this was the first impact, physically impacting us, which was we canceled the Asia Pacific regional kickoff. Every year we have a gathering of the teams that are so spread, and it's a very important moment for them. And we converted into a digital kickoff, which means, well, I was coming in from Paris, some of my colleagues as well, and we had from down under Australia up to China, Japan, over to India. We had about 700 different connection points coming together. It needs good preparation, it needs good discipline, but it's feasible. I think what we clearly see is that this is a good, it shows the vulnerability of our globalization and our globalized value chains. Before, I was mentioning the fact that the physical value chains on the production chains and so on are actually globalized. 70% of all the physical value chains of global trade today is multinational or even multi-continental. And this shows that suddenly, and look at the German car manufacturing, sometimes those supply chains are simply then interrupted. And we see this because China has become such an important part of the world economy. And so we see there, good news is that a lot of our customers have prepared themselves and they have digital tools available so that the knowledge flow is still there. But at the end of the day, we have seen this with several factories that they are still shut down or still not in operation, because you need, at the end of the day, of course, people to run those factories. I think what we also see is that on the B2C side, on the consumer side, if I'm not mistaken, I read this actually last Friday only, that there's a record level achieved, never seen before in China in terms of download of applications, in terms of download of gaming or videos. Why? Because if you cannot move out of the house, I mean, we are human beings, we are social animals, but if you're restricted to just your apartment, etc., of course, then digital provides one avenue to the world, if I may say. And I think this is one of the impacts that we have seen. So in terms of crisis management, I think what is critical is anticipation, trying to share as much as we can, having the right experts. We typically have on these our service teams on it, we have our HR teams on it, etc., to make sure that the knowledge is shared, but also to give assurance. I mean, we have quite a big team in China, and they are led by a local country manager. And a key messaging, key support to them, I believe, is as of the same importance then to make sure that all the rules, etc., are kept. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think, like you said, assurance and being very open with your employees, it definitely would go a long way. In the first half of the podcast, we talked a lot about how Orange Business Services is becoming a network native digital services companies and some of the capabilities that you're adding to your digital services portfolio. So how would you say that you were differentiating yourself from your competitors? Just expanding on that conversation, and who are your competitors if you're no longer just a telco?
Well, the competitors range from very different fields, because if we are providing services along the digital value chain, from collecting data over to transporting, that's the network, that's more the telco classical core business. So there you would have local or global telecom operators, to the cloud service providers. And our aim is not to say, well, we want to be as the same size of Amazon Web Services. They have their own space found, and of course their B2C plays a major role as well. Mm-hmm. But we are focusing on multi-cloud and services. And we provide options to our customers. That's why we cannot focus only on one solution in terms of cloud. So competitors can be players who are in the IT and integration services field. If you look to the cyber defense market, Kelsey, it's very much a very fragmented market, mm-hmm. Where we provide, though, global parametric security solutions, even down to New Zealand. On the other hand, if you look to cyber defense, it's still very much also a local topic. The Germans trust the Germans, the Americans, and so on and so on. So you need to have good local component in it, and that's why we also acquired recently 2 companies in that field across Europe. So to be honest, it's a wide array of different competitors. What is critical for us is also the whole competency and skill transformation. So we are hiring quite a lot of new talents per year, and we're speaking of about 4,000 per annum. And here, of course, the key thing is to be an attractive employer, because we talked before that over the past 30 years, the first wave was globalization, a second wave was digitalization. I believe, looking back to the past 3-4 years, there is something that is emerging, which is the question of purpose and responsibility. And here, Orange Business Services, being part of the Orange Group, we play actually quite an important role, because we have done more than 13 different country certifications across the continent, as we are so global. And with that, the Orange Group and Orange Business Services have become, for the 5th year in a row, also top global employer. That's something where I believe, at the end of the day, like in B2B, customers pay a lot of attention to trust. Same thing is for young and curious people who want to join a new organization that gives them the perspective of going global. Being recognized as a top global employer hopefully should help us as well to continue successfully in this transformation.
Thanks for that. It's interesting. The waves were the first wave you talk about, globalization, was brought about by, all of us becoming more connected and travel being relatively easier. Digitalization, if that's still a word, is or maybe I messed it up, but digitizing everything, basically making it enabling more things on the network and on devices. It's interesting because the one that's different is purpose and responsibility. That's very down to like you said, the individual and their sense of value inside of an organization. That's quite a unique challenge, I think. It's interesting too that you're acknowledging that, because I think if you I think that is going to be a way that companies compete, and they're already starting to compete, I guess, more and more that way, is to make themselves more attractive employers, but also make their employees feel valued as individuals in addition to contributors, contributing workers, I guess.
Absolutely. And I believe, Phil, the more we move into this knowledge society, even though one could say digital is anonymous, I believe very much in digital, what we call digital with a human touch. And therefore, for example, at the first day of my arrival into my new role as CEO of this great organization, I didn't say, well, we have to shift strategy, and because this is a bit technocratic, but I said there is 4 key principles that are important for me and hopefully for the organization. One is customer first. The second one is people empowerment and innovation, because I believe we should not always believe, in this case, our HQ is in Paris, that we are always smarter than people who can decide something in Canberra, for example, in Australia. Third, it's about simplification. We have to step into the shoes of our clients, despite the fact that when you do something in, as I mentioned before, in Burundi, it still needs to be compliant with local regulations. You know, if you do cross-border billing, can you do it? Can you not do it? But we need to keep in mind simplified approaches for our customers. And the fourth is, of course, keeping the promise. And this is both externally as well as internally. And this is why, together with my leadership team, we are looking every week, where do we stand on our key promises vis-a-vis our customers? Is there any critical item that we need to deal with? So you see, this is why I believe it's not always a technocratic strategy a topic to be launched, but also something that is engaging our teams and to be part of this story that we want to write as a network native digital services company.
Excellent. Helmut and Reisinger, thank you so much for joining us on the Light Reading Podcast. We really appreciate it. That is it. That's our show. Thanks to Mr. Helmut Reisinger for his time and insights. Thanks to Orange Business Services for arranging that interview. Very nice of them to make some time for us. Thanks to Kelsey for her quips and questions. Thanks to our production crew, Pierre and Tien, because they are often left to warm up our leftovers and make tomorrow's soup something delightful. Do appreciate their help. Thanks to you, dear listener, because if you weren't paying attention, we wouldn't be able to get away with doing all of this at work. And everyone, please tell a friend to subscribe. Let's get a few more people gathered around the table here, and we will see you next time on the Light Reading Podcast.